How we doing? We okay? All right. Well, awesome. Well, today, it's always my favorite Sunday when I'm not really working. I'm just saying hi. And today's one of those days. We're so privileged that one of my very good friends and former sort of like, if you were here in 2015, 2016, Jay was speaking regularly here at, anyone remember Jay from back in the day? Yeah. Well, listen, he's sort of become a thing over the last few years. He just released his second book, actually, called Analog Christian. You can clap for Jay. It's okay. And so here's the thing about his second book, though. Listen, the man has 2 children, okay? He lives in Silicon Valley. He doesn't have any money. He needs to feed them. The seat back in front of you, there's that QR code. Scan the QR code and buy his book today so that they can do more than, mac and cheese, right, for his kids. Here's the thing. You're in for a treat. And this is what I said to first service, and I mean it. He's the second best speaker you're ever going to hear. The first, of course, is me. So that's fine. I respect Jay's leadership. I respect his communicating so much, his writing. It's incredible. The Christian church is better because of this man, and you all are going to be better because of it. In about 35 minutes or so, you'll be done. So please give a very warm welcome to my buddy, Jay Kim.
Thank you. Hey, guys. Thank you. Thanks so much. It's so good to be back. Yeah, like Forrest said, there was a season where I was out here pretty regularly and, COVID and everything else. So I think this is my first time back in at least 3 years. It might be a little bit longer. So it's wonderful to be back, you guys. And for the rest of you who are newer to Neighborhood First, you found an amazing church. Whether you're a Christian or not, I know many of us are, but some of us are just kind of seeking, or we're curious, or someone invited us, or we're just looking for some hope. First of all, if that's you, you landed in the right place. This is a place where I think you can find home, sort of on your search for the life that, we're all looking for. So if you're new, we've never met, so great to meet you. I do see a lot of familiar faces here at the 10 a.m. It is so good to see you. It really has been too long. So today we are going to spend a little bit of time, and I just want to right off the bat forewarn you. It will feel, for the first few moments, it will feel like I'm giving some weird talk on technology. And you're going to wonder for a little while, I thought I came to church, not some strange tech lecture. But really this teaching is not about technology. We'll talk about technology. But the reason we're going to talk about technology is because really what we want to get to is the sort of people we are becoming, the sort of life you are crafting. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there is a particular sort of life we want to live. We want to get to the end of our days and be able to look back on our lives and be able to say with confidence, man, that was a life worth living. That was a life full of love and joy and peace. It made an impact. I was kind and I was good and I was self-controlled and I lived by faith. We want to be able to live that sort of life, but the reason we're going to spend some time talking about technology is because in many ways, because technology is so pervasive, so always on, all the time sort of reality in our lives, I'm afraid that we are being shaped into people we don't actually want to be. And our lives are being crafted into lives we don't actually want to live. So to begin, let me tell you a story. In the 1940s, about 40% of American adults smoked cigarettes. About 40%. And then in the mid-1940s, cigarette sales began to decline a little bit. And so tobacco companies started to get worried, right? They care about the bottom line. And Camel Cigarettes in particular hired an advertising firm called the William Esty Advertising Agency. And they said, we've got a problem. Our sales are declining. We need you to come up with an ad campaign that's going to pick sales back up. And the William S.D. Advertising Agency came up with an iconic, brilliant ad campaign that they called More Doctors. Let me show you one of these advertisements, print ads, from the 1940s. And the advertisement basically said, more doctors recommend and smoke Camels than any other cigarette. And this ad campaign basically said that they had surveyed thousands of doctors across the country, and they had asked them, which cigarette do you smoke? Which cigarette do you recommend for American people? And they purported that most doctors supported Camel cigarettes. Now, in reality, the William S.D. Advertising Agency, what they did, this is a true story, what they did was they went to medical conferences all over the country, and they went to the smoking areas of these medical conferences, and they would go to these doctors that were smoking cigarettes there, and they would ask these doctors, doctor, which is your favorite cigarette? As they handed them a complimentary carton of Camel cigarettes. And these doctors, of course, would say, oh, I love Camels, actually. Thank you very much. And they built an entire ad campaign based on this, and Camel cigarettes, their sales began to take off into the stratosphere. Now, I share this story with you because, and listen, like if you smoke cigarettes, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to like make you feel guilty. It's really bad for you, but whatever, right? That's neither here nor there. I share this with you because sometimes I do wonder, like today we look at an ad like this and it's laughable because today there's not a doctor in the country that would say, I recommend any cigarette, right? Because we know better today about cigarettes. But I do wonder if 50 years from now, we will look back on 2022 and ask ourselves, how in the world did we ever put these in the back pockets of 12-year-olds? Like I do wonder that. Now here, I want to alleviate a little bit of pressure. I am not here to make you feel guilty about having a smartphone. I have a smartphone, obviously. I just showed it to you. I'm reading my teaching notes off of an iPad. I am not anti-technology. I'm not anti-technology in the same way that I'm not anti-car. I am neither for nor against cars in general. I am for a car safely driving children to school in the morning. I am against a car speeding down a residential street at 60 miles an hour while kids are playing. The technology is not the problem. The problem is us. The problem is me. I'm not for or against smartphones or the internet or any of that, so alleviate that sort of tension or pressure. What I want to get to is human use or misuse or abuse of any technology that leads us to cultivating and crafting the sort of life we don't actually want to live. And the reason I want to talk briefly about digital technology is, again, like I said a moment ago, it is so pervasive. It's literally everywhere. You are online more than you even know. 84% of Americans admit, these are only the ones that are honest and admit it, 84% admit that they couldn't go a full day without their smartphone. The average smartphone user will unlock their phone 150 times a day. That sounds ridiculous, but do an experiment tomorrow and count every time you unlock your phone. You will be shocked. The average social media user, if you do the math across an average lifetime, the average social media user will spend 5 entire years of their life on social media. Many of us, in other words, will spend more time on Instagram than we will in college. And so no wonder digital technologies are forming us. In other words, we are addicted. Like you might not be addicted, or maybe you are and you just don't know it. But if you are not addicted, there is a very good chance someone or many someones you know and love and care about are addicted. That English word addict comes from a Latin word that at the time of Jesus was actually used as a legal term. The word was used to describe in the court of law when an individual was deemed the property of another individual. In other words, when there was a legal ruling that a person was a slave to another person, that word that was used is the Latin word from which we get the English word addict. Addicts are slaves. Many of us, if not most of us, are enslaved to our digital technologies. And the dangerous sort of mental, emotional, even physical, and I would say spiritual effects of our digital addictions, our digital enslavement, these things have been well documented. So I don't need to run through them with you today and just depress you. You can go on Google and look it up, and you will find page after page, resource after resource about how digital technologies and their pervasiveness are forming our lives into the sorts of lives we don't actually want. But one of the reasons why I don't need to show you all of the data, one reason is because you can look it up for yourself. There's so much out there. But another reason is you don't even really need the data. You just need to consider your own life. For me, when I think about my own life and my own experience with digital technology and how these digital technologies are forming me, what I recognize pretty quickly is that, again, I am becoming the sort of person I don't actually want to become. And not completely because of, but at least significantly because of the way I am being formed in the digital age. Self-centric despair. I find myself scrolling social media, and even though intellectually I know that what I am looking at is a carefully crafted, filtered, well-manicured version of somebody else's life, that's not actual reality, even though I know that in my head, what do? I look at their beautiful Instagram feed from the ordinary, mundane, boring reality of my actual life, and I just despair. Why doesn't my life look like that? Why doesn't my experience feel like that? I despair because I compare. I compare my ordinary life to the digital rendering of other people's online lives. And this comparison often leads to contempt. I start to feel real contempt toward people that I'm actually called to love. And they've done nothing wrong to me. And yet my digital proclivities put me in a position where I'm constantly comparing, feeling utter despair, just looking inward at my own life. Then I start feeling contempt toward these people that have not wronged me in any way. I also find myself growing utterly impatient. Everything in the digital age is fast, fast, fast. It's like 4G and 5G and 6G and 20G. Like, it just gets faster. Apple never releases an iPhone and says, this year, this iPhone is slower than the last. Amazing. Right? Like, no one would buy that. Now, that's beautiful and wonderful and helpful and adds a lot of convenience to our lives, but I also realize it's making me an impatient person. I'm losing my aptitude and my ability to wait or to linger in any one thing for any amount of time. I experience deep hostility. Somebody says something online that doesn't fit exactly my own personal opinion or preference on any given matter, and I grow hostile. I feel it deep in my bones. I grow forgetful, and I don't mean I'm on the internet a lot so I forget where my car keys are. I mean I forget that the person on the other side of this digital screen is an actual human person. It's a son or a daughter. It's somebody who is beloved by God and by people. And instead, I just begin to see them as these digital avatars. And then I find myself in this vicious cycle of outrage. I mean, you've heard the term. We live in an outrage culture. Everybody is mad about everything at everyone. And then, in my exhaustion, I recklessly indulge. And the internet is at the ready with endless options for my indulgence. This isn't the sort of life we want. It's not the sort of, I don't even know you that well. Many of you I've never met. You don't know me. But here's what I know about every single one of us in this room. This is not the life we want. And this is not the life God has for us. And yet here we are. We have more access to more information more quickly than any other humans before us, and yet we find ourselves, you and I, more discontent, more fragile, and in many ways more foolish than ever before. So how do we get here? And how do we get out? 2 Peter chapter 1, the writer, Peter, he says this. His divine power, he's talking about God, God's divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Now, if Peter stopped writing right here, then I would actually suggest the internet is all you need. Because the internet is the most incredible knowledge, information, data exchange technology ever created in human history. I can literally ask just about anyone in this room any question I can think of, and within a matter of seconds, by pulling out a little device from your back pocket, you could give me the answer. You could find the knowledge, the information, the data I need. But Peter does not end here. He doesn't say knowledge alone is enough to experience the godly life, the sort of life God has for us. Peter continues in verses 4 and 5, and later in verse 10, he says, through these, he, God, has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may what? Participate. Not just know stuff, but do stuff. Participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption of the world caused by evil desires. For this very reason, I love this phrase, make every effort. And then he continues, he repeats himself in verse 10, my brothers and sisters, make every effort to confirm your calling and election. Knowledge is important. Knowing the information is important, but it's not enough. Our knowledge has to lead to effortful participation. Now, this is where technology gets so interesting. But before we get to that, the late, great Dallas Willard, he described the grace of God in a way that has been like paradigm shifting for me. Often you and I think of grace as just a gift God gives, and that is absolutely true. There is nothing you could do to earn the grace of God. If you could earn it, it would cease to be grace. Grace, by definition, is a gift freely given, undeserved. So you cannot earn God's grace. But Willard put it this way, grace is not opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning. In other words, you cannot earn the grace of God. God's grace is in your life because he loves you. And as we read in 1 John, this is love, that he first loved us. That's grace. God goes first. You never earned it, and you could never earn it. However, there is a gross misunderstanding in the modern world when it comes to this idea. You cannot earn God's grace. That is absolutely true. But God's grace does not mean he requires nothing of us. If you want to fully live into and experience the transformative power of God's grace in your life, no, you cannot earn it, but he does invite you to make effort, to participate. Not to earn the grace has already been given, but in response to the incredible gift that has been given to you. Now again, why are we talking about technology? Because technology in many ways stands in opposition to effortful participation. Let me explain. There's this concept that I like to call technology's deformational trajectory. I first heard this sort of idea from the writer Andy Crouch. And I could use any number of technology examples, but just to keep it simple, let's talk about transportation technology. Transportation technology. To show you visually technology's deformational trajectory. Here's what I mean. About 5,500 years ago to maybe 6,000 years ago, if any human being wanted to get from point A to point B, the only technology available to them were the 2 feet beneath them. That was the only technology. And then one day, they think in modern day Kazakhstan, some heroic person stood out on a field, looked out, and saw a wild horse. And they thought to themselves, I bet if I jump on the back of that wild beast, I could get from point A to point B faster than you could just with your own 2 feet. And thus was introduced the technology of horseback riding. Now, does anybody ride horses here or has ridden on horseback? Anyone? Okay, several of you. Last weekend, Jenny and I took our kids, we're 7 and 4, we took our kids to a pumpkin patch in town where we live, and they had pony rides there. And they're small little ponies, and the ponies are latched to these metal rods, and they just walk very slowly in circles. So my daughter was like a little petrified, she's a little apprehensive, but my son, who's quite rambunctious, he's the 4-year-old, his name's Simon. So we put Simon on the pony, and he's got the biggest smile on his face. Horses are his favorite animal. And he's on this pony. It's the first time he's ever been on a pony or a horse. And he's going in circles. And I have this video on my phone. I'm filming him, and he's coming around. He's got this huge grin on his face. And I said, Simon, are you having fun? And he yells to my phone. He goes, "Why is it so slow?" And I didn't say it, but I was thinking is because if it went fast, you'd be dead, dude. You don't know how to ride a horse. You think you do because it's so slow and easy right now, but that's not how it works. Why? Because riding a horse takes a lot. I've never been, but what I've heard is riding a horse takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of skill, yes? It's not like the movies the first time you jump on the back of a horse, is it? You're not just galloping free through the fields, you're not doing that. You're just you're apprehensive, you're nervous. This is a wild animal that has a mind of his or her own. Yes? Okay. So, horseback riding, this giant leap forward in transportation technology, requires a lot of strength, a lot of skill, a lot of participation, and a lot of practice. And then in the late 19th century, the German engineer Carl Benz introduces the first commercially viable automobile, and it looked something like this. It was less car and more machinery on wheels. To drive one of these vehicles, you had pulleys and levers, and there's no power steering. If you want to turn the car, you're cranking with all your might on that steering wheel, and it took a lot of literal strength, a lot of skill, and you would have to practice and participate with the machine to make it work. Now, it demanded a different type of strength and skill than riding a horse, but it demanded strength and skill nonetheless. Fast forward about half a century to 1939, and both Cadillac and Oldsmobile introduced to the market the very first automatic transmission vehicles. Now, these vehicles still didn't have power steering. You'd still have to use a lot of strength to turn the thing, and you needed skill, when to push the gas, when to push the brake, but it required a little bit less participation, a little bit less skill. It's not manual transmission. The car does the shifting of the gears for you. Do you see where this is going? Fast forward to today, and you have the introduction of what many call the computational car. A Tesla would be an example of this. These are they're less cars, automobiles, and more computers on wheels. Imagine that you are a dad and you've got a young son and you want to teach him how to be a man. So you wake up one Saturday morning and you say, "Son, I'm going to grab my toolbox and the towel, and we're going to go out in the front, and we're going to go on the driveway, and I'm going to teach you how to work on a car," right? Because that's how you're going to get armpit hairs or something. But imagine that you are a dad that for some reason has purchased a Tesla. So you go out to the driveway and you pop the hood and you realize the hood is the trunk. So you close it. And then you walk to the back of your Tesla and you pop the back of the Tesla and you grab your toolbox and you're like, "Son, you're ready. It's going to be a good day. You're going to become a man. We're going to work on this car." You pop the back of the car and you would see before you like a black box. And you would close the back of your car. You'd look at your son and you say, "Good job, son. Great day." And just go back in the house. Because there is no work to be done on a Tesla. It's a computer. When you get in that thing, newer Teslas, you literally don't have to drive. You could tell it where you want to go. and you sit back, relax, and it takes you there. Now, I am not here to bash Teslas or support them. I'm simply trying to show you the trajectory of technology. The Tesla or the computational car demands almost nothing of you. It requires very little strength, very little skill, no participation. You don't really have to practice much. My daughter is 7, so in 9 years, she'll be eligible to get a driver's license. But sometimes I wonder, will she even want one? Because when she's 16, are most cars going to look just something like this, where she can sit back, relax, scroll her Instagram, and the car just takes her where she wants to go? This is the trajectory of technology. And listen, it is not bad. Technology in many ways can be good. It adds a lot of convenience to our lives. But make no mistake, technology always works this way. Technology always builds convenience, accessibility, automation, and ease. As technology develops, our lives become more convenient, more accessible, more automated, and easier. No company introduces a technology with the promise that it will make your life harder. No company does that because you wouldn't buy it. Technology is designed to increase convenience, accessibility, automation, and ease. But as we have just explored very quickly the history of transportation technology, what this also means is that as convenience, accessibility, automation, and ease increase, by its very nature, strength, skill, participation, and practice decrease. Now again, this is all well and good maybe when it comes to driving a car or ordering groceries. But this is no way to form the most meaningful stuff of life. I mean, those of you who are married or have been married for any length of time or are in a meaningful, significant relationship, is there any way that you could have conveniently, accessibly automated your relationship to be easy? Those of you who've been happily married for many years, just look back on the years, the decades you've been married. Is there any technology that could have made marriage easier? And I don't mean like in the day-to-day rhythms of your life, sure, like a shared calendar, whatever. No, I mean like the relational dynamics between you. No. The most meaningful, most human components of life cannot be automated. They demand that we exert strength and skill, that we participate and practice. This is why we find ourselves in the rut in which we find ourselves. Dealing with self-centric despair and comparison and contempt, impatience, hostility, forgetfulness, outrage, and reckless indulgence. It's because digital technology in particular has made our lives so convenient, so easy, and increasingly so. But in doing, we have lost our aptitude to exert strength and skill and participation and practice in cultivating the most meaningful parts of our lives. So where do we go from here? What is the answer? Paul, the writer, Paul, says in Galatians chapter 5, in this famous part of his letter to the Galatian church, where he talks about the fruit of the Spirit, he says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. In the cultural moment in which we find ourselves, in the midst of our digital addictions, we begin to partner with God, to participate, to practice, to exert strength and skill in crafting the sort of life we want, the sort of life God has for us, by asking God by His Spirit to bear fruit in us in such a way that we experience love and live lives of love instead of self-centric despair, joy instead of comparison, peace instead of contempt, patience instead of impatience, kindness and goodness instead of hostility, faithfulness instead of forgetfulness, gentleness instead of outrage, self-control instead of reckless indulgence. Now, we can talk for hours about each of these. That's a part of why I wrote the book. That's what I do in the book. I just parse out each of these. But the main thing I want to say to you today, it's not fun, but it is true, and it is actually hopeful. Cultivating these characteristics of the fruit of the Spirit is not easy. There's not like a 3-step plan I can give you where I can say, do these 3 things in 2 weeks, you'll be this sort of person. Just perfect love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Here's an easy instruction manual. Just do these 3 things and you will cultivate the life God has for you, the life God longs for you to live. No, it doesn't work that way. It takes a lifetime. It takes intentionality. It takes practice and participation. A couple of verses later in Galatians 5:25, Paul says this, if we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. That phrase, keep in step, in the original language of the text, ancient Greek, is a single Greek word. And that Greek word at the time of Paul, at the time of the New Testament, was actually a military term. It was a term used to describe how the Roman military, which was the greatest fighting force in the known world at the time, how they would strategically conquer their enemies by aligning themselves in battle, in particular battle formations like this. This visual you see is described by the word Paul uses here, which is translated into the English phrase, keep in step. So to keep in step with the Spirit is to align our lives with the Spirit of God, to walk through life in union with God through disciplined action and effortful participation. And so I want to give you, before we end, just a few practical sort of things that you might consider doing literally in your life today as a means of keeping in step with the Spirit in the midst of the digital age and our digital addictions. First, practice digital Sabbath. Practice digital Sabbath. The writer Andy Crouch, he suggests one hour a day, 1 day a week, 1 week a year. Is there 1 hour a day where you can completely untether yourself from all things digital? Your phone, your laptop, your iPad, your email, social media, television, all of it. Maybe it's over dinner with your family or some friends. Maybe it's every morning with your favorite cup of coffee and the Bible, or just your own thoughts and in prayer. But is there 1 hour a day that you can literally put on your calendar to remind you for 1 hour every day, I'm not going to experience anything digitally? The irony of that is most of our calendars are on our phones. So you would look and be like, oh my gosh, and then you have to put the phone away, you know? Is there 1 day a week? For my family, this is Saturdays. Most Saturdays, from when our kids wake up to when our kids go to bed, we detach completely from all things digital. Most Saturdays, we'll go on a small hike with our children in the morning. We'll cook a good meal together for lunch. And then most afternoons, we either have friends over or a park play date with friends. And it's such a beautiful reminder that life is not actually lived on screens. That at the end of your life, you are not going to look back and say, you know, I'm really glad I was prompt in responding to my emails. You're going to look back and think about those human experiences you had with the people you care about most and the very real, tangible transformation you experienced in your actual life because of what God was doing in and through you. Another suggestion, cultivate patience by going slow. We are so rushed in the digital age because everything is so fast. But go slow. And you can do simple things to do this. Maybe drive in the slow lane. There is such a thing. You guys have slow lanes in Visalia, right? Drive in the slow lane. Or the next time you're at Costco, go and wait in the long line. And you're all thinking to yourself like, that's every line, Jay. I mean like the longest line. You all think I'm a madman right now, but think about that. Think about how crazy you think that is. And then think about, like, is it that crazy to wait in a line? It just feels that way because we don't know how to wait for anything. Take a hobby. Take up a hobby that'll take some time. Instead of a 200-piece puzzle, get a 2,000-piece puzzle and go slow. Here's another suggestion. Delete things from your phone. I would suggest a very unique and specific practice to you. You can do like a 1 a month challenge, or if you're really aggressive, like a 1 a week challenge for a year. What I mean by that is challenge yourself to delete one app from your phone a month or maybe a week. If you actually take inventory of your digital devices, what you will quickly recognize, most of us in this room, you have so many things there that you don't really need. And then lastly, I would suggest asking yourself, why, really? Every time you go online. Why, really? Like when you're at that red light and this happens, you know? You're like, oh. Why? First of all, it's illegal, so don't do it. But is it illegal here? I don't know. It's illegal where I live. Okay, yeah. Right? But honestly, like why? Is there the possibility that there might be a better way to use your time at that red light? Something as archaic and barbaric as, I don't know, like sitting with your own thoughts. Or this, like some of you are going to be like, what is that, Jay? Maybe it's actually a good thing to be bored sometimes. All of you who are like 18 and younger, you're like, what is boredom? You know, like it's a thing. You know, in fact, there's a lot of research that shows, recent research that's been showing that in order for us to tap into the most creative parts of our neurology, you actually have to take the path of boredom to get there. I think this is like a sidebar. I think one of the reasons why in the digital age, everything and everyone is just the same. You know what I'm talking about? Like it's just everyone's saying the same thing, everyone's yelling the same volume, everything, you know, like everyone's just chasing each other for clout and whatever. One of the reasons is because we have lost the gift of boredom. And it is making us culturally a less and less creative culture. We're not creating anymore, we're just copying. Because we don't take the path of boredom to get to genuine creativity. Listen, all of this stuff is going to take a lot of time. It's not going to come easy. A couple of years ago, or about a year ago, me and some friends, we were in San Francisco. We were celebrating one of my friends who was moving away, and we had just had lunch, and we're walking around. We didn't really have any plans, and we saw this small little shop, and it was an origami shop. You guys know what origami is, like the Japanese art of paper folding. And none of us are into origami, but the shop looked really cool, so we're like, oh, I don't know, let's go in there and check it out. And when I walked in, at the very front of the store, in this large glass case, was the most incredible, mesmerizing origami piece I'd ever seen in my life. And it was called the Ryujin 3.5, and it looks like this. It's a dragon. That's paper that somebody folded. Now, the Ryujin 3.5 was developed by one of the world's greatest origami artists, a guy named Satoshi Kamiya. And in traditional origami, there are no cuts or adulterations. What that means is that origami piece you are looking at is a single, uncut, square piece of paper. And most origami artists, once they develop and create an origami piece, what they do is they will post online publicly what is called a crease pattern. And a crease pattern is a design that shows with lines every fold involved in creating that piece. This is the crease pattern for the Ryujin 3.5. Every line you see is a fold of paper. Every line. You can go on YouTube and look up Ryujin 3.5 tutorial, and the tutorial videos are 12 to 14 hours long. So let me ask you a question. Well, let me say something and then ask you a question. Every single one of you in this room could create the Ryujin 3.5. Every single one of you. I just showed you the roadmap. There it is. Literally, I could print that for you, and you could create that masterpiece. So let me ask a question. How many of you will? Nobody. Nobody, because nobody cares. Nobody loves origami that much. No one cares. Who cares, right? I don't care. I'll never make it. Who cares, right? I don't have the time for that. But what if it wasn't a paper dragon? What if it is your life? What if it's the life of those you care about most? Do you care then? I had this experience a few years ago when my daughter was 3 or 4, and I had just taken a picture of her and her brother, and it was super cute. So I was like, this is my Instagram winner of the year. So I'm there cropping the photo, and then as I'm looking at this digital image of my daughter, my actual human daughter tugs on my pant leg, and she looks up at me with sadness in her eyes, and she says, "No more email, Daddy." And I realized in that moment, in her 3-4 years of life, she had experienced me physically present, but absent in every other way, usually checking email so often that she thought it was happening again. In that moment, I put my phone away, I cried, I hugged her, I apologized, and we played. And what I recognized is, this is not the life I want. When I die, I don't want my little girl to say, you know, my daddy, he sure emailed well. Like, I don't want my daughter to say, you know, my dad, he had a lot of Instagram followers. What I want my daughter to say is, my dad loved me, and we experienced joy together, and he brought peace into our home. He was patient with me. He was kind. He was good. He was faithful to God and to mom and to our family. He was gentle, and he had self-control. That's the life I want. That's the life you want. And it feels impossible, but I am telling you, if you would fold your life just one fold at a time, just one fold at a time, at the end of life, you will discover that your life is a masterpiece that God always knew was possible, but you never could have imagined. Amen? Let's pray together. God, we thank you for your goodness and your grace in our lives. We thank you that you are patient with us. We pray that in this moment you would give us the courage and the conviction to begin to fold our lives into the life of your Spirit, so that we might truly live and experience the life we want, the life you have for us, in the midst of all of the digital distractions vying for our attention. So that our lives, at the end of it, whenever that day comes, we might look back and say, yeah, that was the life God had for me, a life worth living, by your grace. We love you and we thank you. Pray these things, Jesus, in your name. Amen.